myself, but you guys can interrupt me at any time. I don't really have a problem with it. John Dougherty. I actually graduated in Oneonta in 1987 with an economics degree. Back then, that was enough credits to sit for the CPA. And it sounds funny, but back then there were big 8 accounting firms, and now we're down to the big 4. And I think everybody that I speak to when I talk to Oneonta and accounting is people think, we don't stack up to everybody else. And the fact of the matter is that's not really true, right? I've seen people come and go. I've been around the firm for a pretty long time. I am actually one of 5 people at the firm remaining from my starting class. And, accounting firms talk about starting classes. So this year we started 195 people in the FSO that I'm in. And that class will be the class that goes forward. Since 1988, though, I only have 4 other people that are with my class. So in that year, we had 300 people. So I'm one of 5 that are left out of 300. And it's not just because of Oneonta, right? There's personal reasons and things that people move on. But at the end of the day, you can build your own career no matter how you're looking at it, just how you apply yourself at the firms. I will tell you the one big thing that firms use as a pre-screen, though, is a GPA. But once you get into the door, nothing else matters. The university doesn't make a difference. Your GPA doesn't make a difference. It's all about you as an individual. And I think people kind of think a little bit differently about that. And they feel like, I can't get a job. If you guys don't know, accounting is the most desired skill set today in the job market. Most people won't tell you that, but it is. And even if you don't want to do accounting, the number one background recruited by the FBI to become an FBI investigator is accounting, because you got to do that analysis. So unfortunately, you'll hear that there's a constant demand for accountants, right? And that's a good thing. And give you guys an understanding on how much the world has changed. So I've been at the firm for 30 years. When I started, the starting salary for an accountant was $27,500. Their starting salary for an accountant out of school right now is $72,500. So you got to think in 30 years, they basically tripled the salary. And that's a pretty good run rate compared to other industries. So from an accounting perspective, I think the Oneonta sets you up. But I also think that you need to understand that accounting may not be the only road accountants go down. And I think people get very confused about that, where you can become somebody who focuses on technology, which I do. You can become somebody who actually focuses on finance. You can become somebody who's in the business side, because those skill sets carry over across all those things. So we actually see that happening. So you'll find out that in accounting in the big 4, it's very different. And I'll give you guys just an understanding. In the big 4, we expect the turnover rate in our lower ranks about 25% a year. And the reason why we expect that turnover rate is because we know it's not meant for everybody. But once you get past a certain level, there's a very different change in the attitude. Our turnover rates go down in the 3-4% rates from the first 2 years. So if I equate that to something that you guys know in college, right? When you went and started taking your classes and you took accounting 100 and 101, right? And then you went to the advanced, that's where people make and break it. Same thing in big 4. It's usually once you get past your second year, you can understand if you want to kind of be in this, the business or not be in the business. So I'm going to stop there because I have 3 paths I can go down with you guys. I can go down how you need to change when you're moving from college into the work world. I have a presentation on kind of what big 4 accounting firms look like. And then I have a presentation what an advisory firm looks like to help you guys understand that. And most big 4 now have what they call advisory/consulting firms, where they also bring accountants in to help them run their business. So I'll leave it up to you guys to tell me which direction you want to go in. Go ahead, Max.
Could we try the advisory firm?
Sure.
Thanks.
Tell me if you guys can see it.
Yep, we see it.
And should be in presentation mode in a second. You guys good?
Yep,
Is it the big one or the small one?
it's the big one of the young man jumping,
Yep.
and it's the full screen.
Yep, thanks. So one of the things that you're going to find, and I'm going to skip over the video because it's not going to play well. We're looking for people, and because we're trying to get differently than we are before. So just in EY alone, to give you guys an understanding, the advisory firm generates $5.4 billion. And when you think about Ernst & Young as a whole, we generate roughly $41 billion on an annual basis. On a global basis, our advisory practice is almost $10 billion, and we have 67,000 employees. When you combine that with the firm, we're almost a 300,000 employee firm right now. But when we try to balance ourselves, we can't do everything. So what we've kind of done is like support ourselves with alliances. So most of the big four have alliances, but we have what we call strategic alliances that allow us to get into certain organizations very well. Because we're an accounting firm, plus we're in a consulting firm, we can't really be in alliances with our audit clients. However, we've made strategic alliances with some of the clients that you see here to make sure that we can penetrate in the marketplace. And to give you an understanding, we're trying to expand the base. And what that really means is, if you just look at the risk marketplace, the risk marketplace right now is projected to be $54 billion in 2021. You know, we want a piece of that. But also there's market space in technology implementation. There's market space in, you know, finance transformation. So we want pieces of all those pies to diversify our portfolio. So that's why we reach out to those alliances, right? But one of the things that we want to make sure that we tell you and make sure you understand is our biggest thing is we as Ernst & Young don't own anything. And almost every accounting firm and advisory firm doesn't own anything. The biggest asset is the people. Right. And without that knowledge and without those people, you're not going to move very far along. And I know you guys are not in any office that we have, but technically all of our offices are leased, all of our equipment is leased, all of our buildings are leased, because we don't view those as being real assets. The real assets are the people. So you're going to hear us talking about all the rewards that we get on people, because technically that's what you got to focus on. We're not trying to bring you in as a expert in anything. And if anyone says they're doing that, I would actually really run away from that client, because we're trying to bring you in as a good athlete. You've been trained, but you don't know what you want to do, right? And the fact of the matter is that we'll train you up and we'll make you into a diversified athlete. And if any firm comes and says, listen, I got a perfect role for you, I would really run away from that, because what that's really telling you is that they're not hiring you as an individual, they're hiring you to fill a role. And that's not a firm that you want to be in, because I can guarantee you today, no one knows what they really want to do in the future, right? And the fact of the matter is, working for a firm that allows you to move around really help you. And to give you guys an understanding, I started on the accounting side in, where did I start in? I started in manufacturing, and then I went to entertainment, and then I went to retail, and then I went to technology, and then I went back to retail. Then I became a technology specialist. Then I became an environmental person. So as things moved along, I try to move along with it, and the firm gives you the training and opportunity to get there. So if people don't tell you they're focusing on people, you kind of want to move away from that, because people are one of the biggest assets that consulting firms have. The next area is we've moved away from just being a firm that's focused on generating revenue. The concept that we're talking about is having a purpose. What is our purpose in life, right? And our purpose in life is to build a better business world. And we align everybody to that. And we align it through 3 different buckets: reimagining the way the business can work on, transforming industries, and improving communities. And what we mean by that, it's a pretty broad statement, right? So we tend to think about business differently than a lot of other people. And I'll give you a couple examples that are ideas that came from us. You know, we sit there and look at our client base and we look at our industry base and figure out what is the next step. But it doesn't mean we can't come up with creative ideas. So all the wireless connections that you guys see in automotive cars and those things, we actually brought that up as it relates to that. When you go to Walt Disney and you're wearing the GPS band for all the tokens and stuff, and the same thing that goes on at Caribbean cruise lines, we're the ones who actually convinced them to move to these GPS devices for locators and fees to make sure they can charge individuals. right? So that's kind of reimagining how the business works. Transforming industries is kind of, when you think about it, when we really need to historically change everything that we're doing. We actually work with firms to actually transform the business model, but also transform the way they're going to do things differently. And it's really important to understand that some of these areas that we're going to get right and some of them are going to get wrong, because this is a new space for everybody, and we try to transform the industries. And the last one is that we want to focus on is making a better community. Better community gives better individuals ask better questions get to better answers, right? But also a strong community actually has a strong business model. And for years, we've been focusing on the communities. And it's an unusual thing because we call it EY Ripples, right? EY Ripples is a program that we tend to make investments a little at a time to build ripples to make sure people can make progress. And our Ripples program right now is pretty big. What I mean by that is that I think we had over 2 million people who applied for scholarships. I think there's 1 million firms that have gotten investments from our EY to help them through kind of building up their processes. We actually have donated, I think, in the neighborhood of, it's like 3.5 million hours a year into the communities from a training perspective. So we want to make sure that we're actually helping the business, helping the industry, and then helping the communities that are going on. Many firms have this, but we're very focused on making sure that we can get there. And it's a tough practice, guys. Like, trust me. Our CEO made a statement that we would be carbon neutral by 2021, right? Believe it or not, COVID has helped us out tremendously, because if you think about all the travel and things that we do as a firm, consulting firms are one of the biggest uses of airlines, hotels, and everybody else. So to get that at being carbon neutral by 2021 is a huge task. And we've made significant progress, even beyond COVID, what's going on. The next area is that we want to make sure people understand is that you need to help your clients move in the transformation age. And what I mean by that is no one's really been thinking about where firms need to be and how they're transforming, right? They want to basically grow, optimize, and protect. Either you're going to grow the business, you're going to optimize the business, or you're going to protect the business. But in reality, you need to do all three at the same time. And with the world changing where it is, the pace of technology, the pace of change in the marketplace, but also the pace of change in people, right? I don't think people have seen a generational change this drastically in the last 100 years. When you think about it today, there are over 4 different generation models in the workforce, and we work very differently. The way I work is very differently than someone coming new into the marketplace. And there's people above me that are working very differently than that. And therefore, it really affects you across the board. So you need to think about the new world, how do you protect, optimize, and grow, but across people, process, and technology is a very difficult concept, because most people only want to do one. Can I protect my business, right? If you're just protecting your business, you're not going to grow, right? If you're only focusing on grow, you might lose some of your other businesses, right? So you got to build and make sure that the models are balanced between those things. And most people are getting to that service. And what you're seeing in consulting firms is we're becoming the managed services organizations for a lot of people, because we can combine all three to make them effective. So what we will cover today, at the end of the day, we'll look at kind of transformation, what does careers look like, characteristics, insights, and campus hires. What does career look like? I will really tell you it's different from every individual, because it's up to you. And what I mean by that is, as a first year coming into the firm, all we're expecting you is that you have a good attitude and a good aptitude. Attitude means if you have a crappy job, you're doing it with a smile. We all know jobs are crappy, but the real question is, if you do a crappy job with a smile, you do a great job, great. But if you do a crappy job with a bad attitude, who's going to put you on a good job? No one's going to do that. And the aptitude is your ability to learn, because we know you don't know everything. We were all in those same positions. So at the end of the day, you need to understand that we're asking you to think about transforming the business, building our culture, right? And driving innovation. And you can learn from all those things, right? What type of people are we looking for? We're actually hiring a ton of people of different backgrounds, because we want diversity in our model. But you'll hear us hiring people with accounting degrees. You'll hear us hiring people with pure tech degrees. We'll hear us hiring people with history degrees, right? Because it's not the degree that's important to us. It is actually the person that's important to us, right? Because what you know today or what you're learning today is going to be very different in the future. And I'm not going to pick on the accounting programs, but like, things that I learned in school, really, I didn't really focus on, right? How do you record bonds? How do you record stocks, right? I got thrown into how do you do, how do you actually record derivatives and other things, which I didn't know, right? So you learn and move on, and you just kind of build a trailer of knowledge that you guys got to move forward with. So we look for diverse people that give us different insights and capabilities to make sure we're different. And I think the one thing I want to always tell people, not everybody's the same, right? To be very honest, I am not the tree hugger type of person. I'm more like, let's get it done, let's push it through. Do we have people in the organization that are deemed to be tree huggers? The answer is yes, because they're unique skills, guys. Every skill is important to an organization, and you got to make sure that you utilize those skills across the board. So characteristics, this is the political way of them saying you're connected, responsive, insightful. At the end of the day, most Big Four want type A personalities, right? They want them to be go-getters, aggressive, right? And figure what they want from the organization. And almost every consulting firm does the same thing. The day one you come into that firm, you're treated as a professional. And when you talk about being treated as a professional, you're responsible for your career. You're responsible for engagements that you're on. Don't expect somebody else to tell you what to do. You're expected to ask questions and manage your own career. And that's very important to understand. And the more people see that, the more they'll actually engage in you on that topic. The other one is characteristics. What we're really looking for is somebody who can see beyond kind of what they know today, right? Can you be a bigger picture person? Can you think and learn differently, right? This one we've been talking about, Professor Flynn for a while, right? Could you be the creative thinker, right? Can you actually think about solving problems differently? And unfortunately, guys, this is going to become bigger and bigger as we move in the digital age, right? As more analytics and more data comes available, right? Accountants are going to be asked to use and become creative thinkers on how to solve problems through the information that we have today. And to me, this is a big thing, right? And this goes back to a statement I made a little bit before. You're not going to learn anything unless you want to learn it. And unless you learn, you're not changing. And unless you're changing, you're not growing. And then if you're not growing, you're not going to get, the opportunities that are sitting out there. They're all in connection with each other. So the other one is we ask people to think about technology from every angle, right? And I know in the past, if you knew Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, you were deemed to be a good person. Now you need to be thinking about how do I bring in analytic tools? How do I understand data and bring that into my processes as well? And believe it or not, it's also going to the next level of, how familiar are you with social media? How familiar are you with all the collaboration tools? Because everybody's using those now today. So, using Power BI, using, Teams in a different format, using analytic software is going to really help you out. So you need to think about that software. And then when you think about where we want you to be, right? Where we want you to be is become an advisor and an influencer, right? We're not expecting you to be that today, but we want to be there. We want you to be an inclusive leader, right? That thinks about things on a global basis. And we want you to ask better questions. These are the goals that we have for everybody. And the reason why we have them is at the end of the day, if you're not growing, that service that you're in today, probably within 5 years will not exist. So therefore, everybody needs to transform. Everybody needs to influence where the market's going to be going in the future. So when we think about delivering in the transformation age, we need to make sure we're bringing in the right people. And what we're thinking about is, can you solve complex challenges? Can you communicate things in an easy, understandable way, right? Are you agile, adaptable, right? Do you want to help with making a global brand or becoming a world leader? And what I mean by that, these things, guys, it's different, right? You need to think about services that don't exist today, and then you generate them, create them, implement them. And if they work out, it's a wonderful thing. And if they fail, you tried, right? And I can only tell you that most consulting firms will actually tell you that if you're not trying, then you're failing. right? Because the world constantly changes. And I'll give you an example. If you have, almost every consulting firm focuses on sales and utilization. But if you have $10 million in wins and no losses, and then you have $10 million wins and you have $8 million in losses, who's a better person, right? And most people are going to say 10 with 0. Most firms would tell you 10 with 8, because at least they tried. 10 with 0 means you might have had other revenue, but you didn't try, right? So when you think about it, failing is going to be part of the equation. And it's tough, right? Because that's not something accountants have been used to, right? And it's a very different career than everybody else thinks, because you have to be comfortable with failing on certain items. So most firms bring in people into an advisory program. We call it advisory consulting program. And then what we brought in is people that are BAP, RAP, TAP. So the RAP is our risk advisory practice. The BAP is our business advisory practice. And the TAP is our technology advisory practices, right? And then they feed all of our industries off to the side. There are also some people, what we call specialists, right? Because you're not going to get everybody with accounting degrees. We hire doctors, we hire construction people, right? We hire environmental engineers, right? We hire chemical engineers. So we actually bring those in to make sure that we can support the groups, right? So we actually have a lot of different people that get brought in. So you can be brought into the TAP, BAP, or RAP, totally up to you. Or you can bring in advisory specialty if you actually have that specialty moving forward. But you should think about a program is that almost every firm does the same thing, some type of what I call a bifurcation. All my business people, my technical people, and my risk people. And then there's usually some specialties below that. So I'm not going to go through these, but I'll send the deck. These are just risk programs that advise the types of people and types of degrees that we look for. So risk advisory, they look for accounting, finance with technology, MIS. So for the BAP, they look for accounting, business, finance, economics, statistical, supply chain, right? Healthcare administration. And then the TAP, they really look for computer science, computer engineering, MIS, information technology, mathematics, ops, statistical, technology, risk. These are just a handful, guys. We don't really make them a required degree. You should know that every accounting firm interviews people both domestic and internationally, and because of visa laws, our job descriptions have to be pretty vague. Because if we literally say we need somebody with a 5-year accounting degree, and we get somebody foreign who has a 4-year accounting degree and a 1-year finance degree, we can't hire them because our program said you had to bring a 5-year accounting degree person in. But you basically can hire any type of person and you can fit the role that what's sitting inside of that. So the other thing is that you guys need to go online, and online is going to tell you a lot more because, to your question, Max, you can actually pick the service online through a recruiting channel and it'll actually go through the services for you. And what we tend to do first, though, is go through your locations. And we've learned this as an experience. And I think most of the big fours are also doing this. You actually pick your location, and then based upon location, that's what's available to you. Because people tend to want a job, but they don't live in an area where that business is being sold. So we first basically say, where do you want to work? And then we tell you what jobs are in that area. So for example, if you want to work in financial services where I work, it's either going to be Boston, New York, Charlotte, Chicago, San Francisco, Dallas, right? We're not going to hire anybody in, let's just say, Wisconsin, for a finance degree. Doesn't make sense because the financial services firms are not there, right? If you're thinking about healthcare, you're really going to think about the Northeast Midwest because most healthcare clients are in the Cleveland, Chicago, New York areas that are sitting out there. But to me, pick where you want to live versus picking the job opportunity that you have, because making yourself happy is important, right? And you're not always going to be happy if you're living in a place you don't want to live in. And at the end of the day, if you want to have a job in a foreign location, literally you can just put I want a job in a foreign location.
No, Julie, you're taking me.
Yes. And one of the things that you have to do, and I'm just being very cautious, especially this year, if you guys are in COVID, you got to be careful because that country may not let you in. So that's not our limitation. That will be the limitation of the country. So that's kind of an overview of advisory. Is there anything you guys want to ask questions on or concerns? Nothing.
I have one question.
Sure.
You said that when we start off, don't expect to basically try and fill a role by just trying to be an expert in something, that to treat it as if we're athletes and to be molded. What's the best way that in terms of not being pigeonholed into just one area and to try and get a versatile understanding of the company?
So there's a lot of stuff, Max, on people's internal websites that you can actually go to, and then there's a lot of training that you can go to. So when I was coming up through the ranks, if I was working on something, I worked on it, but then I took additional training programs. I took additional information. So when the industry came up that I wanted to work in, I had the skill sets to move forward within it. The one weird thing that we actually have, like we have a technologies master's degree that you can earn through taking online classes through EY. So literally, if you are an accounting person, you want to become more technology literate, you can start taking technology classes and convert to become a technologist. But I tend to find that, you enjoy things differently today than you might think about, right? So a lot of people come in, it's like, I want to work here. I'm like, great, but get a broad experience, because that may not be where you want to end up. So you want to look for firms, Max, that allow you education for free. You want to make sure that you're looking for firms that give you education. At a minimum, you guys should know that we give 120 hours of education for every one of our staff. And you sit there and go, that's not a lot of time. That's a whole month, guys. We allocate a whole month to education to bring people up to speed. And that's just into the first year that you're in with the firm. But we have certifications, we have education, right? But the one thing that's always been a trigger for me is if they tell you they have a job for you as a first year, you're filling a role, not a athlete, right? And that's not a good position to be in, right? Because then you'll be in that role until the next replacement comes across. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you very much.
Questions, concerns, issues? Guys are pretty quiet.
People are always afraid to be the ones to unmute themselves, but I have a question. And maybe I missed it, but can you talk a little bit about how things have changed business-wise since the pandemic started, and if you have any advice for the students for how they can kind of gear up for that kind of transition if they're graduating into this kind of environment?
Yeah, I don't think COVID's going to go away. So what's happening right now on this video call is an example of what cannot happen when you get a job, right? Our only means of communication is through interaction presences, right? And therefore you guys need to be able to interact on the presence and make sure that you're recognized as an individual, right? And unfortunately, like through recruiting, through even jobs that are going on, 100% of my work, right, is now through Teams, Zoom, Blue Jeans, Skype, whatever that is, for me to sell and to deliver work, right, with not ever going to a client. So 100% of my interactions have to be through virtual presence, and therefore I need to change my environment to be a person who can give trust and confidence to a client through a virtual meeting, right? And it's difficult, guys, a lot harder than you think. And people think it's not a big deal. It is a tremendous big deal, because all I have to do is one little swipe, and I'll show you. If I move the Zoom presentation, can I move it now? No, I can't move it. But if I start doing this and I'm looking at a different screen, it's obvious to you that I'm not paying attention, right? And most people don't pick up on it. We do interviews video right now, and if you guys haven't done a video interview right now, we first ask you questions up front. And so we do a pre-screen. You need to record yourself and answer the questions. I can't tell you how many people put the answer right in front of them and are reading and not really interacting with the video, which really just basically says the person has no video presence or anything else. So, to me, the biggest change is how do you work in a virtual world, right? And be productive, because it's very different, right? And I think people have found it very hard to get around. And it sounds funny, but a lot of people, several of our clients, we caught fraud, if the best way of explaining it. So let's pretend that Professor Flynn, is working as a day-to-day reconciliation person on a financial services firm. She's working virtually. Now she calls a friend in India, she outsources her job to somebody in India, and then they're doing the work for her. And then we don't know what's going on. So we found a lot of places where people have started working on multiple jobs at the same time because they're outsourcing their job to other people in other countries because they don't feel like they have to be present. So what you're now seeing companies do is actually saying that you have to turn your video on, you have to get engaged because the amount of risk and fraud that's going on is going up in the world. So to me, virtual presence and how you guys present yourself is the biggest change that's going to happen, because I don't think COVID's going to go away. But the other thing that is also, this has affected, we've been able to prove that we can work on clients remotely. So therefore, clients are not going to pay you to fly around the world anymore. They're going to sit there and say, let's do a video conference. Let's do it this way. So, and if you guys don't know, like consulting spend is very different, right? If you had a $500,000 project, you would tell the client that you need $50,000 for expenses. So technically the project would be $550,000. Now in a virtual call, what'd you just do? You gave them $50,000 that they can spend more on services than on expenses. So that's also going to change. So I think those two things combined is really going to change the way we work and will function. Does that make sense?
Thank you. We've been conducting some interviews, and I experienced that where the person was literally clearly reading their sort of responses that they had prepared from something on the top of their screen, and it is very obvious. Just so you know, my camera's over here, so I am paying attention to you.
I've had to put I have my computer and then I have my screen, and my screen sits on 2 cans of tomatoes, so I can actually see it above my computer screen. We've all had to create virtual offices relatively quickly. And it's funny, people are getting used to it, but like there's still a lot of things that do happen. And that's one of the things I had on my other slide is if you guys are going to go have video meetings, to me, it's worth getting a virtual background that you like and you move forward with it, because we've had too many meetings where people didn't make sure the room was clean and we found things on the desktop that they shouldn't be on the desktop. We've had people's roommates come in their underwear. We've had kids come in naked after taking the bath to say hi, good night to their mother. So things happen, right? So being on a virtual background does help some of that, and you don't have to take that exposure that sits out there today.
John, it's Charlene again. I'd like you, if you could please, to expound upon the point that Danielle brought up. Remember in the old days, you had the nice firm handshake and you could read the body language and whatever. Some of those things are more difficult as they're moving forward in this virtual world that you described. So can you give the students a few of your hints of how you're able to conduct a professional meeting? There's not even the elbow bump on this virtual world. Can you give them a couple of your top things that you would do to keep a professional meeting, beside the eye contact, which you mentioned, but a couple other things that you do, John?
Yeah, and it sounds funny, I'm just gonna not pick on people on the screen, but give you an example. Look how Professor Flynn, right, and I are closer to the screens, and some people are very far back. What that gives the impression is that you're not engaging. What you want to do is kind of push yourself into the screen, right, to make sure that you're showing that you're engaged in the conversation. So, and you want to be able to move, right? Anyone who just sits there like this and doesn't move, well, and this, we also caught people doing this because people have taken themselves a picture of themselves and actually have that being projected versus actually being in the meeting. So you need to make sure that you're engaging and you're moving forward, right? So I don't know if you guys saw that. The only person who reacted to that whole thing was Professor Flynn. No one else moved. right? So that's how you have to move around and get engaged, because that means you're paying attention. The other thing is that it sounds funny, and I would never have recommended this before, but the chats are now becoming a big thing, where if I agree with something someone said, but I don't want to make it, coming out and, voicing my opinion loud, people go in the chat, I agree with you, great comment. And they're sending to everybody to show that they're engaged. And that's becoming much more accepted, where people are using chats while a conversation is going on to communicate their points in agreement or disagreement. So to me, being more upfront on your computers, showing the movement that you're having that is sitting out there, and engaging in chats and things that go on, right? Even like if you put up a thumbs up or other things that you're engaging, that's very important. But the two things I will also tell you, look at your background, look at what's there, make sure it's professional, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, guys, right? If you have kids' art and stuff, hey, that's fine. That doesn't really bother me. But if your bed's not made and there's stuff laying out on your counter, right? Or you're in your kitchen and people opening and closing the doors, use a virtual background, right? To get rid of that. But to me, if you don't have, and I kind of think what you're saying, Shirley, and I'm kind of agreeing, if you don't have a way to communicate, it's going to be a very tough marketplace for you guys, because the only way you're going to interact with people right now is through video, right? And it sounds funny, my nephew started with Ernst & Young 2 weeks ago as a first year, right? And I call him on the video and he's not even picking up the video. And I'm like, what are you doing? Well, we don't turn the video on. I'm like, dude, you want to get promoted? You want to move forward the firm? You got to get with the program. Don't you see other people? Well, we never turn on in college. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, right? It's a different world. And get it, guys. Like there's, and it's not a judgment, right? Men tend to don't really care what they look like sometimes, women do, right? So you'll hear this, oh, too early in the morning, you're not going to get me to turn on the camera. That's fine. But you made an interaction, you made a joke about it, and that's a good thing, right? Versus just not turning on your camera, right? And it sounds funny, but like I'm on international phone calls all the time at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm dressed. And then there's a ton of other people saying, I'm not getting on the phone call because it's too early in the morning, right? But to me, the video presence and how you engage, and to me being like moving, like so people see your motions and stuff is very important, because otherwise you're just a stoic figure that's not really paying attention.
John, one of the questions in the chat box was, can you speak a little bit more about what jobs expect, on what jobs expect of students after college? So a little bit more about employer expectations. And you started talking about that just now with, cameras on and paying attention and interacting. But if you have any other advice for them, that might be helpful.
Yeah, and I can't give perfect advice right now because the world is changing. This is the first time I'm wearing a dress shirt. All week long, I was wearing a t-shirt, right? Because it's all internal meetings, everything's different, right? So our internal meetings are very different than our external meetings. So to me, the expectation is are you engaged? Do you share your knowledge? And are you asking the right questions? Now, the question to get asked something, if you're not happy about something, right? Don't say you don't want to do it. What you want to do is you do it and you ask, is there anything else can I get engaged in? So you can start changing the area of focus that you're working on. There's a tendency today that people focusing on saying no. And I mean, I said this in the last couple of Backpack the Briefcases, and it was different because we're live. But if I had a project, right, I walk around and sit there and say, hey, Stephanie, are you busy? And Stephanie goes, yeah, I'm really busy. I have no time, da, 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 da. Right? I would go to, John and say the same thing. Hey, John, are you busy? You'd say, I'm super busy. I would move on. Right? I would go to Max and say, Max, you're busy? Max would say, I'm busy, but how can I help you? Well, Max, do you want to go to India for a week with me? Right? And then Max would say, sure. And then the other two people would say, you didn't come to me and offer me the opportunity to go to India. And I said, well, you said you were busy, right? You didn't say I'm busy, but how can I help? Saying no or giving the impression that you're too busy to do things will actually limit your opportunities in a firm, right? So what I would expect you to think about is, even though you're on a job, talk about it, because there might be different expectations that you guys can get involved with. And everybody rises and falls, right, in the first part of the year. Like some people are and I don't want to say this the wrong way, but just understand what you guys are going to get to. The big four hire the upper echelons of GPAs and from upper firms. When you put them all together, you have a lot of type A personalities who expect to be at the top, right? But a new bell curve gets set. And we understand that, right? So there's some people who are going to struggle and move forward. And it's a momentum that it's not like you're going to be there your entire life. You got to figure out how do you have to change your stuff to get to the new things. So no firm usually has an expectation that says you need to be an expert on this on day one. Technically, most firms, when you get to the end of the first year and someone has a bad year, they usually blame the firm, not the individual. Now, that's not always true because sometimes the individual does something. But if John was in a bad role and we didn't support John, we were like, okay, we got to give John another opportunity, put him on a different project, right? So that's kind of what we call the buy, the first year buy. If you get a bad opportunity, bad thing, and it didn't mesh well, usually the firm takes responsibility and gives another year. But on those things, what you want to do is learn from those expectations, right? My first assignment, when I started working, I was kind of really pissed, right? I went to school, got my master's, and I started with the firm. And for the first week, I made photocopies. That's all I did. At a copy machine for 8 hours a day making photocopies. That doesn't really exist anymore because there's no such thing as paperwork papers. And I came home every day, pissed. And then I finally called my boss and listen, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to go. And he goes, what are you, stupid? They're paying you that salary and all you do is making photocopies. Be happy, right? Think about it. If someone's paying you a lot of money to make photocopies, you should be happy about it. And that's where I came up with this attitude thing. Even though the job's bad, hey, you got to be happy about it because guess what? Better things are going to come, right? And they always do, guys. And I think that's the thing that most people don't realize is that you need to think about short-term pains you need to go through for the long-term benefit, right? I mean, I had somebody, I don't know if you guys ever heard the concept, it's called demutualization. It's where an insurance company buys out its shareholders and actually becomes a public company. So MetLife became demutualized. So they paid off the shareholders, which are the investees, and then they became a public company. So we got hired to do the demutualization of MetLife. And I had to observe the production and mailing and receipt of ballots for the vote. And we worked 12-hour shifts, 3 days a week, 2 days off, and then 12-hour shifts again. And someone's like, yeah, that really sucks. And I said, but think about it. I'm working my week in 3 days. I get to stay in a hotel for 3 days, and then I'm off for 3 days. Every day for 50 weeks. Is that a bad schedule? Not so bad, right? You just got to be happy with what you're getting and how do you make through that. But I don't think anyone expects a lot. What they expect that you have is a good attitude and good aptitude, right? And then you have the thirst to learn more, right? It is a big difference.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind my asking.
Sure.
So you had previously mentioned that high class and high tier employers will look for high class and high tier individuals coming out of previous professional positions and out of their education. What role does co-curriculars play in this, and how can you kind of amplify your thirst and desire to learn if, say, if I'm competing against somebody who goes to an Ivy League school, I'm not going to rank as high as them looking at that on paper, but yeah, how can I amplify what my skills are to make myself look like a better candidate in your eyes?
So the first thing you have to do is that you're not comparing yourself against somebody in Ivy League. You're comparing yourself against what's on your paper. So for example, if like many of the accounting firms are putting GPAs out there, and there might be a change coming forward because technically that's a glass ceiling for some people of diversity for diverse backgrounds. But right now, most firms have a 3.2 background. If you have a 3.1, what you should be putting in your resume is, listen, I had to work through this, I had to do this. You need to explain to the recruiter what was the situation. If you just put it in like that, it gets flipped. And trust me, I've done the flips, right? I get a stack of resumes, doesn't hit 3.2, I flip. But if there's something on the resume that says, full-time mom, I had to put myself through school. I had to like, you got to put those things in so people understand the differentiation, because it's not always just the GPA. There's a lot of background into it. So to me, if there's a difference, what you want to do is start reaching out to the recruiters and talking to them so they understand your position. So when your resume comes through, they can actually put that overlay right in that conversation. And to me, if you have, and we've had this in past, guys, trust me, if you are going to be a engineer, right, and you went in the engineering program and you got crappy GPAs because they want to fail people out, and then you went into the business program and doing good. I literally have seen people break out, here's my GPA from my first two part of the years, and here's this, and it was an engineering versus this, and I'm doing very well here. And that really just helps you through that process. I don't think anyone cares. Like, I don't care, where you came from, Cornell, or you went to Harvard. It doesn't bother me. I don't think it bothers anyone else. People don't even see that. All they see is the type of degree you have and your GPA. If they think it's applicable and you think you have good experience, that's great. The other thing is that when you think about your resume, don't write down standard stuff, right? Don't write down like I was a pizza clerk, right? That's not what they want to hear, right? You got to make yourself sound a little bit bigger. And I know people say that, well, John, that's lying on the resume. It's not. You're embellishing on the resume, and trust me, other people embellish on the resume. Like I worked for Federated Department Store. That's Macy's, Gertz, Stearns, right? I could have put down sales associate, right? And that would have been fine, right? I put down valued employee who crossed multiple functions, working in inventory, cash management, da 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 da. Nowhere did I lie. I was just put, I was a valued employee, right? And I think people would appreciate that. And most people don't understand. Like, if you've been at a location and you've done multiple jobs, that is actually something that helps you through the process. So to me, letting people know your personal story, letting people know how you did your work, right, is very important. And if you didn't reach out, none of that's going to come across, right? To me, is to reach out and send that in the email, or actually reach out and talk to somebody.
Thank you. The reason for my question, I work for career development as a peer mentor. So I review resumes and professional documents. So going off of your response and with that in mind, what are some of the skills that you think I should be flagging for students to be amplifying on their resumes, like soft skills, hard skills, things like that?
If they took classes like critical thinking, analytics, and those types of things, they should be putting that on the resume. They should be highlighting their skills. They should be highlighting any diversity training that they've engaged in and moved forward with. So to me, diversity and inclusiveness, people have been involved with, technologies from an analytics and critical thinking, people soft skills, right? If you took leadership programs, a lot of people flag leadership programs, and even if they're a single class, right? And because I laugh because I get a lot of resumes from Lehigh University, and there's a class like, I don't know, 305 leadership training. And every for Lehigh has that carved out on the resume. And I'm like, okay, what do you guys learn on this class? And someone said, well, you're the first person to ever ask me that question. And none of them could explain it well. But other people who basically have it on the thing can talk about it a lot. This is what I've learned in my leadership classes. So to me, I would actually put them on the resume, right, and focus on it. I'm not saying hide things. I'm just basically saying make sure you put it in the right light, right? Don't use passive terms. Use positive terms. Right? I'm managing this. I'm doing that, especially if it's current. Right? And a lot of people use the negative terms. And then get it done soon. Right? That's the biggest thing I always tell people. I was on the 5-1 program with Clarkson University in Oneonta. I had to have my resume finalized and submitted by August, right, of the year I was a senior, or my master's, right? And believe it or not, Big Four done with their recruiting by Thanksgiving.
I believe it. Thank you.
John, we're rounding up towards the hour that we've carved out on your
Sure.
day. So I'd like to ask you, for the accountants on the call, for any information that you can share about the CPA exam or the ICPA, not to go too deep, but just a couple little nuggets you might be able to fling out to the accountants on the call as they're gearing up to prepare for the CPA exam.
Yeah. to me that the CPA exam has changed drastically over the years. However, right, and most people saying it hasn't, but when you think about, the different parts that we need to take and everything else it has, I think the CPA exam is a way of proving that you actually have the competency that's sitting out there, and, training and understanding those competencies are a good thing. However, I'm going to be counter to a lot of other people. I couldn't care less if you guys get a 90 or get a 76. You passed, right? And a lot of people in the big four will tell you that you got a 76, great. You got a 96, you study too hard, right? Because there's no difference. Like unless you're going to get the highest award, and anything in between doesn't really make a difference. But you got to take it and recognize it. But what I would tell you is take it, and especially take it in school, but don't, and this is weird, and people are going to disagree with me, don't pass it. And what I'm trying to get to is that if you come to a big four accounting firm and you already passed your CPA, you get 0 bonuses. However, if you start with 3 parts down and you only have to take 1 and you pass it as a first year, it's a $10,000 bonus. So it sounds counterintuitive. Like, yes, I took the CPA exam before I started because there was no bonuses. But can you imagine, like, you could be losing out on $10,000 just because you passed it before you started. So most firms have a rule. They're asking you'll get a bonus of $10,000 if you pass it the first year. And that bonus goes down to $5,000 in your second year. And then after your second year, there's no bonuses. So to me, take the parts that are important. But like, if you're going to focus on accounting, auditing gets easier if you do it. So to me, take the parts that are going to be much more in tune to what you're doing in college today, right? The theory and the law practice parts. Auditing gets way easier once you do it once, right? Because then you're really going to understand the concepts. But I wouldn't miss out on the $10,000 bonus, right? I even told my nephew was sitting for the CPA exam. I said, listen, dude, I wouldn't pass. And like, you can pass some, but don't pass it all until you get that, right? Why would you give up in 10 grand? Right? Very important for everybody to understand, because that is a big impact in my opinion. However, you don't get your CPA exam by the time you're a senior, you will not get promoted. Right? It's pretty clear. And there's no wiggle room. But I will qualify the but. You can go onto the advisory side, right, and work on the advisory side. You just won't be working on the accounting side. And I play both sides, so I still have my CPAs, and I'm on the advisory side and the accounting side. So my education is very tough because I got to do training for the consultant side, and I got to do training for the accounting side. And then maintaining your CPA in different states is not that easy. New Jersey does not accept New York state ethics, and New York does not accept New Jersey ethics. And you guys laugh and think it's not a big deal. Yeah, I had to take 4 hours of New Jersey ethics training, and I had to take 4 hours of New York ethics training. So I wasted 8 hours taking ethics training, which collectively should be the same, but they don't get carried over. But to me, I would definitely get a CPA. It's always worth money. It also helps you with positions in the future because it's accreditations. But also, if you're not taking the CPA, you guys should still look for accreditation for other services, right? You can become a certified financial planner. You can become a certified information systems auditor. You can become, a certified network engineer. These degrees, most consulting and accounting firms pay for, right? And it's a good thing to have. And if they're going to pay for it, why not take advantage of it?
Absolutely excellent. Lisa, will we have John's undivided attention? Is there anything else we'd like him to share with our students?
I feel like you've answered an awful lot of great stuff. I think, and we're coming up near the end of the hour. I think it was really great. And
Yep.
Yeah, appreciate all of your insights, of course, John.
So 2 things I want to make sure I just remind people. It's now November. We're coming up on kind of the fall recruiting being done, right? If you guys are thinking about doing internships, the same thing is happening. So you need to make sure that you actually go to the websites, file and get that in, because if you don't get it in, you'll not be interviewed. And I do think there's going to be a change in the way recruiting's done. So recruiting might happen differently because we went to 100% video. So you could actually fill out your application and be contacted within 2 days, right, to do your video interviews. So if you haven't done those things, whether you want an internship or you want a full-time job, so full-time jobs are for next fall, internships are for next summer. If you're not going into firms today, you're not going to get there. If you try to do it in January, you're not going to get anywhere because they're not really opening up. What they're trying to do in January is identify candidates for the next cycle versus kind of the cycle that we're in today. And what I mean by that, technically, almost all firms that are counting are in 2021, right? That's our fiscal year. We're already in 2021. So that takes us all the way through the summer. So what we're hiring is for 2022, which is next fall. Does that make sense? Thanks everybody for joining. Greatly appreciate your time. Good.
If students have any follow-up, is it okay to share your email, or how would they, is it possible for them to reach out to you if they have any follow-up questions?
No, you can send it to my email out. That's fine.
Okay,
Doesn't really
perfect.
bother me.
I'll put his email address in the chat for those of you who want to hang on.
Well, John, we want to thank you so much for sharing with our students. Every time I hear you speak for the backpacks, I'm always impressed. And again today, I think our students are taking copious notes on everything you were sharing with them. So your time is very valuable and we appreciate it immensely.
Thank you. And if there's any questions, just let me know, and enjoy the nice weather for the weekend because it's supposed to be nice this weekend.
Thanks,
John,
John.
All right.
So John, I didn't know you went to Clarkson. I guess I missed that.
Yeah, I was one of the first 4 ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I went to Clarkson after many years and got my MBA from there as well. So
Yeah.
you and I are on the same page. Well, I'm way behind you, but I'm crawling up your page.
All right. Have a good day.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.